Gentleman from 14.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you. Good members of the body, as we look at this piece of legislation, I think it's important that we go back to where we started and why we're here. And I provided a handout for each of you that I'd like to refer to in my debate, if that's all right. And Mr. Speaker, what I'm referring to is the actual legislation, the Affordable Care Act legislation.
I wonder if a page could bring one of those to the Speaker's desk, please. But the gentleman may continue.
Thank you. And this may be a little dangerous to do this after lunch because this may put all of you to sleep, but I'll do my best to keep it somewhat informative. The section I wanted to start with is Section 1321. The title of this section is called State Flexibility. That seems like a good section to start, right, as we discuss this exchange. Let's maybe talk about a little bit about the flexibility that we have as a state. The first section, in general, the Secretary, who is that? That's the Secretary of HHS, shall issue regulations setting standards for meeting the requirements. So what actually is she doing? She's doing one, big A, the establishment and operation of exchange. B, the offering of qualified health plans for such exchanges. C, the establishment of the reinsurance risk adjustment program. And D, any other such requirements. I look at that and I don't see a lot of flexibility there. In fact, the only flexibility I see is how we say yes, ma'am. Next, perhaps under consultation, we have a role to play here. Let's read what that says. In issuing the regulations under paragraph 1, the Secretary shall consult with, who is she talking with? The National Association of Insurance Commissioners and its members, and with the health insurance insurers, consumers organizations, and such other individuals the Secretary selects in manner designed to ensure balanced representation among interested parties. You'd think in the section that talks about state flexibility, maybe consulting with the states would be a good idea. We don't see that at all. Little b, state action. This is where we are at today, folks. This is where we have the opportunity to decide what we are going to build here and if we're going to build it. But so far, all we've learned is that maybe they're going to give us the blueprints on what the store is going to look like. They'll probably tell us what kind of paint has to go on it. They've definitely told us exactly what the products are going to be in the storage. You remember that was subpoint big B. The offering of all qualified plans have to be approved by the Secretary. So far we don't have a whole lot of flexibility. And then we get to the failure. And this is our choices here. And I want to jump to towards the end of that, where it talks about the Secretary and what the default is if this doesn't pass. It says the Secretary shall directly or through agreement with a not-for-profit entity establish and operate such exchange within the state, and the Secretary shall take such actions as necessary to implement such other requirements. This wording here is actually very, very important because the Secretary isn't saying that the federal exchange is a state exchange. If it read like this, the Secretary shall establish and operate such state exchange within the state, that would be an important clarification. It is not there. And in a minute, you're going to see the implications of that. The fact that it's only called out as an exchange. Then going on, you see enforcement authority. Subpoint D is kind of interesting. This seems like they're throwing us a bone here. No interference with state regulatory authority. Nothing in this title shall be construed to preempt any state law that does not prevent the application of the provisions of this title. It seems like a good thing, doesn't it? But unfortunately, it's a red herring. And then subpoint E, little e, has to do with a state that already has exchange. Folks, that is all. of the hundreds of pages that talk of this law, you have a page and a half that talks about state flexibility. A page and a half. And of that page and a half, you tell me how much flexibility we have there. I don't see that we have much flexibility at all. We have no control of the products in the store, the design of the exchange. So what do we have? Hundreds of pages of law, and we have a page and a half that mocks us by calling it state flexibility. It gets worse. I told you that unfortunately that red herring existed. Go to now Section 1252, the last line, but it's not preempted under Section 1321D. We don't really have the control that we thought. Now, as you're sitting through this debate, at the top of this paper that I've given you the address, the URL, that you can type into your browser to actually look at the entire bill. And just for fun, you ought to just type in the search words, each state shall. Each state shall. When you're doing that, read all of the requirements that we have. These aren't options. These aren't choices. Each state shall. This is just one example here in Big E, where it says transition planning and oversight. Each state shall submit to the Secretary for the Secretary's approval the income eligibility thresholds. Do we want that? Do we want to be on the hook for that? Do we want to be policing that for our people? I hope not. I did interject one little quote from the letter that we received from the Secretary to our good gentleman on the second floor. This is the only part that is not part of the actual legislation, and I hope it's okay, Speaker, if I refer to this letter.
Without objection.
Thank you. So we're talking.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about the cost of this legislation, and we've heard a lot about the fact that the federal government is going to be there, helping us along the way, paying the bills for us. Well, this was her response back to our good gentleman on the second floor. She said that we must demonstrate legal authority for all necessary state-based exchange functions as described in the Affordable Care Act, including financial sustainability. That doesn't sound like someone who has your back, does it? We have to prove that this is going to be financially stable over a long period of time. So let's talk a little bit about the costs involved in this. Next, Section 1343, risk adjustment. Each state shall assess a charge on health plans and health insurers. The next paragraph, each state shall provide a payment to health plans and health insurance. So we're the middleman here, aren't we? We're having to assess and then pay and then so. What value are we adding other than being the bank for the federal government in this process? I don't see that we're adding any value. And then let's talk about the implementation of this. Look at Section 1413. 1413. It talks about the development of secure interfaces. I know a little bit about interfaces. That's what my company builds, software interfaces. And it says each state shall develop for all applicable state help subsidiary programs a secure electronic interface allowing the exchange of data, etc. And then it goes on to talk about the complexities of these software interfaces that have to be written here. There is the presumption that somehow our state may be able to do this cheaper. I would submit that there may be that logic may not be accurate. You look at this and you think, all right, who has the economies of scale here? Well, one state doing it versus the federal government who is doing it across multiple states. Well, they have economies of scale. So they've now set a price. We don't like the price. We think it's a bad price. But somehow we think on our own we can do it cheaper. We have no economies of scale. even if we outsource this to another company that thinks they may have built it and can plug and play in our state, they're going to want to be paid for their effort, and as opposed to that being distributed across a number of states where the economies of scale, that we are somehow doing this cheaper. Logic would dictate that we can't do it cheaper. I submit that we may have a situation here where we don't know the price. It's already been stated. We don't know. We don't have all the facts. But we do know what we're going to get charged for it, and that fee may be the best price in town right now because of the economies of scale. Well, the last point I want to make has to do with the real downside of this. Do you remember I made the point about how the fact that this is called they did not put on an equal footing the federal exchange and a state exchange. They could have, in that phrase at the beginning, if it says the Secretary shall set up a state exchange, they would then be on equal footing, but they're not. And as a result, we get to be the bad guys. Section 1401, this is very interesting. Section 1401 has to do with a change in the IRS tax code. If you'll look at that, it refers then below to Section 36B. That 36B is an actual change within the IRS tax code. In other words, the way that this mechanism works is a tax credit. It's a tax credit for those that are on the exchange purchasing insurance. The mechanism is through the IRS tax code. Now, the problem lies in subpoint big A, where it says that these premiums or this tax and the ultimate enforcement has to be is executed through an exchange established by the state under 1311 of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. That is different than an exchange that the federal government would run in the state. We can't mince words here, folks. This says clearly here, through an exchange established by the state. That's the only place where this mechanism exists. Good members of this body, most everyone came into this chamber today having a pretty good idea of how you're going to vote. The reason I wanted to go through this original legislation is because I felt it gave each one an opportunity for us to check our assumptions and make sure that the law is really in line with what we assume. Because just because we want it to be so, just because we take the word state and put it in front of exchange, we think that it's somehow magically empowering us. Folks, there's no magic here. We are not being empowered to do anything. So I hope this gives an opportunity to check our assumptions, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that we won't sign up to be the puppet. We won't sign up to be the enforcer, because that's the only way this can be enforced, is through that state exchange. I hope that we will all realize that this would be a short-term tragic mistake. I encourage your no vote.